Hey, Terada, thank you, and kia ora tātou. It's the second speaker from sunny Hawke's Bay. Can I just also extend my welcome to you all? It's great to have a gathering like this here to talk about a wonderful project called Cape to City. And I do want to just acknowledge Cape to City. This is my only opportunity on stage, so I'm just going to pass on to you that as Terada mentioned, I do have the privilege of sitting on a bunch of boards, most of them located outside of, and I'm just wrecking the place, but I don't think that's important, of Hawke's Bay. So Cape to City is my Hawke's Bay project I'm involved with, and it's really exciting. And I do want to acknowledge Campbell Leckie, who runs this project. It's inspiring. It's successful, and we've heard a whole bunch this morning about the issues that we have, and I'm certainly not belittling those, but we're making great progress. So just before I launch in, my topic is big picture farming trends and the importance of farmland to biodiversity outcomes. And again, Campbell sort of gave me a nice intro on that this morning, Campbell, so thank you for that. I do farm only half an hour from here, up on the hills of Tipa Hui. For those that, and some of you that travelled from the northern areas, you may have come past us on the Napier-Taupo Road. I'm hidden up there in the pine trees. So we have a problem, and I guess this graph shows only too well that our biodiversity has been in decline. But we also have had some great successes, and I've got to say that little fellow on the, just going back on that one, that thing called a possum on does it come out for you? No, I've got different screen for you. That's the fellow on the left-hand side there. It's, you know, I congratulate Hawke's Bay Regional Council. I know Osprey's here. I know William McCook, the previous General Manager of Animal Health Boards here. We've come a long way with some of our pests. It'll be known to many of you that in 1980, well, I guess we topped out at about 70 million possums all up. That number's now well reduced. I know for Trelano, where I live, possums were the bane of our life as a child growing up. We now, if I see one or two a year, it's something to watch out for. And we have seen an explosion in biodiversity, an explosion in bird life. I've lived up in the hills for 50 plus years. I won't give you the exact secret. I have never, ever seen as many birds as we have today. So we've got a lot to do, but there's some success that we've had. So we're heading down the right track. Tying in the farming side of it, let me just start with a global picture. These things are challenges for us all, for farmers and of course for the ecological environment. Climate change, the issue of our time, warming temperatures, wild weather. It's something we're going to hear a lot more about in time to come, and I'm a little bit involved with climate change aspects in Wellington. And just to put it in perspective, I've been involved with water issues for a long time, and I guess my simple saying to politicians in Wellington is water is I treat as the entree. Climate change is the main course. So we've had a lot of angst and issues with water, and we've still got a long way to go, but climate change is, in my view, a much, much bigger issue to deal with. Food security, just going around that little loop. This planet currently supports 7.6 billion people. By 2050, according to United Nations figures, we're going to have to feed 9.3 billion people. And because everybody's eating better and better quality, we're told as a farming community that to support 9.3 billion people, we need to increase our food production by 50%. That's not going to happen if we want to preserve the environment that we all love and honour. So we've got to change the way we farm, and I'll be touching on that in a minute. Water quality, hot topic. The population of the world has tripled in the last 100 years. Our use of water has increased by 6 times. And the reason for that is as our living standards lift, as we become more wealthy on average across the planet, we use more water. We move up the food chain, we move up from cereals to higher proteins, and of course the proteins we produce in New Zealand, like red meat, like milk, take a lot of water to produce. So we've got an issue. We've got an issue now, heaven forbid, when we add another 2 plus billion people on the table to feed. So this all sort of comes together on environmental sustainability, and all these issues are interrelated, of course. One depends on the other. Warming temperatures, I've touched on more people. As Ruud touched on, and I'm a little involved with the biosecurity issues as well, the warmer temperatures, we're going to be really challenged by incursions, diseases, fungi, pests coming through. So we've got some work to do. Bringing this to a New Zealand context, we are merely a microcosm of those four big issues that the globe is facing. But let me tell you that dramatic change is underway. And some of this will be familiar to some of you. And these changes in the farming community, because this is about responding, I guess, not only to climate change, but to all the other factors that influence us as business people. And we, like all New Zealanders, have our eyes well and truly open to the issues that farming is having on water, global warming, emissions and the like. So the big conversations, I guess, amongst my colleagues in the farming community is volume to value, commodity to niche, and animals to trees. And let me just touch on those briefly. A good example of volume to value, in 1982 we had 70 million sheep in this country. Today we have 27 million sheep. So in those 35, 40 years we've reduced by 43 million the ruminant stomachs that we have on this country. I'm leaving cattle out of it at this stage. And the exciting thing is that we export today a similar quantity of sheep meat that we did in 1980. So business people, farmers, no exception, are pretty good at becoming more efficient. So it's a pretty exciting story that we can, red meat's still our number 2 export earner. We can produce the same quantity of meat from 43 million less mouths consuming that feed. Commodity to niche, that's a story we talk a lot about adding value. It's not easy, but things like Wagyu beef, I guess, we sort of specialise in. We do a lot of beef, but Wagyu beef, Manuka honey is an exciting one. Higher value cheeses, pizza, mozzarella, and the like. So it's about understanding that we can't possibly, at only 4.7 million people, supply the world with all the food they need. Our position, being so far away in the South Pacific, is to aim at the top end, to the discerning customers, and give them that product, which includes the story that New Zealand gives behind, which is, as we see today, and on the slide here, the green grass, the blue sky, and hopefully cleaner water as time goes on. It's all part of the providence story that we tell along our products. This animal to tree one, this is, and I'm going to use the word evolution rather than revolution, but this may be slightly new news to some of you, but we're seeing a massive change in New Zealand's farming landscape. I can tell you as a farming leader, and I've put my hand up many times before and admitted that the dairy pendulum has gone too far. The science and the data is telling us we've got some issues with our water, we've got some issues with emissions. That's changing quickly. Farmers understand that without a sustainable environment, we don't have a sustainable business. So every single month now, thousands of hectares of dairy farm are disappearing. What we're seeing in New Zealand is a transfer. Currently we have dairy as our number 1 export earner, red meat is number 2. If I was to sit up here and do my bit about reading the future, that's going to change. In a generation's time, my view, the biggest export industry we'll have in this country will be horticulture, and the number 2 industry will be forestry. And that's because we have learnt with the science and data telling us that trees, crops generally, are more sensitive to our environment, are easier on our waterways, don't have the issues with methane emissions that our ruminant animals have, and of course, tying this all together, give us a far more supportive environment for the biodiversity, the bird life, the insect life that we've talked about. But it is a story of constant change. So yeah, watch those, as I say, volume to value, commodity to niche, animals to trees. It's big changes underway, and we see that for those visiting Hawke's Bay. We're rapidly increasing apple plantations around here. Those of you from the Bay of Plenty, and I know there's one or two, kiwi fruit's just going through the roof. And of course in the far north, we're seeing one of the biggest transformations that I've probably seen from pasture to crop since the late 1970s and 80s. We're seeing thousands of hectares going from dairy into avocados. So the future's changing, farming's changing with it. It has to. Campbell touched on the importance of farmland to this whole debate we're having. We ain't going to achieve predator-free New Zealand without farmers being on board. And I think I can rightly say, representing various farming groups across the countryside, that we certainly are on board with this. We think it's a wonderful aspiration. That's I guess my enjoyment being part of Campbell, the Cape City. So we want to be part of getting predator-free, and rural land will do its bit. It's the link, as we know, between all those other bits and pieces of government land, council land, QE2 and the rest. So, as I've given you a picture, we are a dynamic industry. And perhaps just a couple more numbers to show you how dramatic things change is, I make a comment up there about mistakes have been made and priorities change. When I finished university a while ago now, we had a government in this country that was incentivising the clearing of our bushland, incentivising the clearing of our hillsides of scrub. So late 1970s, early 1980s, we were a country, an economy on our knees. So our priorities were different, and discussions in those days, admittedly my memory struggles to go back that far, but I'm sure I never heard the words ecosystem services, biodiversity, water quality. Those things weren't talked about. We were incentivised as a farming community to earn some foreign currency so that this country could play its place in the world. And you know, what do? I look back with some horror. Now, we cleared over 800,000 hectares of bush and Kānuka Mānuka scrub, as we called it, generally on our steeper country. We did that because the government of the day thought that was the right thing to do. Of course, with wisdom, we look back now and say, that wasn't really very smart, was it? And I guess what intrigues me is that we have another government in place today, and I think someone made the comment, was it due to radar? We shouldn't be talking politics, but there's always a danger to me when governments get too involved, too hands-on with things in the economy. We have got a government today, and I support absolutely the moves to do better around our water and environment, but we do need to be a bit careful, just on the basis that, as I say, 40 years ago, the government was telling us to go this direction. Now the government's telling us to go in that direction. And I think it is the right direction, but it's just the sense that I think communities and businesses pick this up much quicker than government, so it's just something to be aware of. So the good news is the reversal has happened. We are seeing more biodiversity and plant life coming through. The PC's report's been mentioned a couple of times, and I do again want to applaud Jan Wright with that report. Wonderful report, and Andrew, I agree with you. It's a great read. She does a fabulous report. So long-term solutions, as has been talked about, has to involve rural New Zealand. We are 2/3 of this country. We have to be on board, along with DOC, along with councillors, along with all the good groups represented in the room here today. I did have a quick look around before. I don't think Gareth Morgan's in the audience, is he? After the grief he gave poor old Paddles last week, I was a bit frightened to put this one up. I thought I'd probably have a shoe coming at me or the like, but these things, and let me assure you for those that like your pet Moggy, this is a feral cat, and these things are trained killers. I read the figures that we use in Hawke's Bay here for, certainly in rural Hawke's Bay, about 90% of all the cats we have in the landscape are feral cats. And I can tell you, after having what I think running a fairly successful predator control program on my own family property, these guys are the hardest to kill, real challenge. And so we got a job to do. But the point I want to make here is I guess the farming's role in biodiversity recovery. If Just moving back briefly to the possum situation, I guess the eradication program that we've run here in Hawke's Bay and around a lot of New Zealand, it's been really, really successful. And one of the key reasons is that there was both an environmental and an economic benefit for the farming community. I, as a farmer, I can tell you, it cost me thousands of dollars a year, thousands and thousands to be part of the possum eradication program. It was called the TB program, because we knew there was a real economic cost if we got TB in our cattle herd, that our export markets could potentially close down on us. So it was a case of we killed the possums to try and reduce the TB risk. So we achieved two things with one end. And this is a really exciting, one of the findings we found with Cape City, these terrible things called feral cats. They carry a disease called toxoplasmosis. You're probably well aware. It causes early abortion in our sheep. One of the things I hate about sheep farming is we have to inject our sheep regularly for all sorts of stuff. They're pretty soft animals. And one of them that we do every single year is for toxo. Because if we don't, we risk the toxo parasite affecting our sheep. The feral cat is an integral host in the life cycle of the toxoplasmosis parasite. So if we can take the feral cat out of our landscape, and the figures I've seen for Hawke's Bay, we Hawke's Bay farmers spend about $350,000 per annum just on toxoplasmosis vaccine. It costs us about $1 million per year in lost land production. So this sort of stuff is a really good driver for the farming community. If we can get an economic benefit and an environmental benefit, we're right behind the program to get rid of these feral cats. Great projects underway already. Let me just touch on, and I'm a little bit biased, I do sit, as was mentioned, I sit on the board of QE2 National Trust. And if you haven't heard of the QE2 National Trust, here's a wonderful, wonderful organisation doing neat things. We celebrate 40 years this year. We have 185,000 hectares now in New Zealand, 1% of our entire land area, under protection in perpetuity. So this is, on average, if you take that 40-year period, 2 to 3 generally farmers coming to us every week voluntarily saying, here's a special piece of our biodiversity, please can you cover it in perpetuity, and it becomes part of the QE2 estate. So the way I see this stuff happening, and I've commented with the riparian planting, a lot of that going on, we're going to start linking up the dockland, the QE2s, the good work that farmers are doing just on their own private capacity, and have a far better environment for biodiversity to flourish and grow, I hope. Rabbits. This is the perverse outcomes, Trader, that I had that little conversation about last week. But this is a real issue that we have to address up front. I'll just use rabbits as an indication. So when we're already starting conversations with our Hawke's Bay farmers, particularly in the footprint, 34,000 hectare footprint of Cape City. So what if we take out all the mustelids? What if we take out all the feral cats? What if we have a whole lot more our riversides planted and trees and protection and the like? Any farmer's going to tell you, well, hang on a minute, my rabbits are really bad at the moment. What's going to happen to my rabbit population? And I can tell you, if I go, and it's a weather thing, we have, up on my home property, Trello, we have more rabbits now than I've ever seen. So it's about not stopping this just because we're scared of rabbits or scared of birds, increasing numbers of birds spreading our weeds. We've got to get a bit smart and use science and management to combat this stuff. So again, and particularly as the council people will know, we have a new biocontrol with rabbits being released right around the country in autumn next year. So we just have to get smart, and we've done some science around it as well, and what that science has told us is that, yeah, cats and the mustelids do have an impact on the numbers, but more so is the weather conditions and the breeding conditions for those rabbits. So it's about keeping our eyes well and truly wide open. And as I say, particularly with the weed spread one, we're watching that closely from a QE2 perspective. If I put that hat on, we've, as I say, 185,000 hectares. We did some science and some numbers, because that's always important for me to make certain that we're talking about real stuff. Waikato University put out a study last year which determined that the 4,000 odd farmers that have voluntarily locked up special pieces of bush and biodiversity, they're spending about $25 million of their own money every single year managing the pests and weeds on that piece of land that's been locked up for the benefit of not only all Kiwis, but all of us on the globe, and keeping the fences up to date. So that's a whole bunch of money that's got to come from somewhere, and it comes from farmers' pockets. That's the important bit that I touched on, that if we can get an economic driver locked in with us as well, it's going to be far more sustainable. And that's the comment there with the profitability is important. So, conclusion is that any solution to our ecological challenges have got to include farmland. 2/3, as I say, of our land here, we've touched on that, is farmland. There has been good progress, a whole lot more to go, and I guess that's something that we're up for the challenge, and we're looking forward to getting to a far better place where we are today. You've got massive farm systems changes underway, and I've only just touched on a few of them. I haven't touched on the technologies and the AI and the other bits and pieces that will affect the way we farm our countryside. But this is bang on Terada. Terada's just turned over the nought on his bit of paper, and I'm finished. So I think this is an exciting opportunity. Thanks for hearing the farming side of the story, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Bruce.